we go. Ma whiro ma pongo kai ota I te mahi. Every element has a role. Here at NZCER, we've been using this lovely little whakatauki to talk and describe how PAT has a place at multiple levels within the education system or within assessment, really. And so that, we bring a range of information together about a learner when we're thinking around where to next in those teaching steps or about teaching practice ourselves as well. And today I'm going to talk about the STAR assessment and discuss how the STAR assessment can support and supplement the information that you have about your learners in reading, and particularly around reading comprehension and the early skills of reading. So it's just a nice little whakatauki to start our day. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is just describe and talk a little bit about the STAR test, and then I'll go in and I'll talk about the features, I talk about resources that we've got made. I'll go online and show you the reports on NZCER Assist, and then we'll have some questions at the very end. So please save up your questions or place them in the chat and I'll answer them at the end. Here we go. I think it's really important that we remember that the STAR reading tests are a standardised tool and they're designed to supplement the daily information teachers notice and recognise about their students' reading skills. Okay, and I think that's really, really important that it is a supplementary test. That's why it's called the STAR supplementary test. So they're just one source of evidence of reading, but it provides a nice little snapshot at that particular point in time. To really properly interpret it, we have to remember that this information needs to sit alongside all the other information that yourselves and teachers collect about our konga on a daily basis to really get that rich picture around progress and achievement about each our konga. So it's one little piece of evidence that adds to that wider picture or wider puzzle of learning. So here's our suite that we have at NZCER, and you can see we have a range of tools from science to literacy tools to maths tools. And so we're looking today at the STAR test down here. It's not part of the PAT suite. It's actually what we call a test in its own right. So the STAR, like I talked about before, it's a supplementary assessment around the progress and achievement in reading. Each test assessed the range of reading skills that correspond to the main components of the reading skills outlined in the literacy reading progressions. Okay. Some of the features are that there are 10 tests aimed at different levels, as you can see in the table on the right. The tests are designed to be able to be used across more than 2 year levels. This gives kaiako the flexibility to choose the appropriate test for their akonga. They're available online as well as also in print. And at the moment, the assessment tool hasn't been updated to look at the new design, to have the new design flair that we have it here at NZCER, but it is on the list to be looked at in the future. So the structure itself, each test has 4 subtests. You can see them listed there: word recognition, sentence comprehension, paragraph comprehension, and vocab range. In years 7 to 9, there are 2 additional subtests that look at 2 specific things that really do support that the skills of reading in the years 7 to 9 level, and that is the language of advertising and reading types of different texts, like the styles of texts. For our konga in years 3 to 6, they have 20 minutes to complete the assessment, and 7 to 9 has 30 minutes because of the 2 additional subtests. So it's a nice, I guess you can say, short, sharp, snappy little assessment that gives you some rich information at that point in time. So here's just some examples that popped out of the year 3 to 4A test. So read recognition is about what is the picture. So word recognition shows how well a konga can decode words that are likely to be in their spoken vocabulary. A konga must decode accurately using letters and sounds. The sentence comprehension, students have a drop-down box and they've got to select a word from the drop-down box to finish the sentence. So they're really looking at, can they read for meaning here? They select a word from a drop-down box and they're assessed on their skills of decoding and the ability to use a range of strategies for meaning. Paragraph comprehension is fill in the blanks. So you can see here that it is a closed technique approach, and it's used to assess a konga's ability to make meaning in longer text than than in the sentence comprehension one previously back in subtest 2. More linguistic and knowledge cues are classed on from, the students have to draw from these from surrounding ideas of information within the text. And then the final one for this subtest is the vocab, which word means the same. Vocabulary measures a kunga knowledge of word meanings and context by requiring them to identify a synonym for each word. Okay. And then the 2 additional ones for 7 to 9, the language of advertising, assesses a kunga's ability to read critically. It identifies emotive words that are typically used by advertisers when trying to attract consumers to buy their products and services. Whereas down the bottom in the reading different text types, students in upper primary are expected to read with understanding various styles or types of writing, both formal and informal. When completing the reading type texts, students select one phrase that best suits the style and purpose of the writing from 3 possible phrases. So they just got to choose one that goes and that best suits it. So there are the 6 subtests within it. Now, a little handy hint that I've been giving out each time I do a little webinar is that in Assist, you can actually view a preview of the test. So when you go to the dashboard, you can go across to the right and go to the action side, and there's a little eye there. And that little eye, you can actually see the test that students are sitting, whether it be an online test. If you've got the paper ones, you can flick through it. If you're doing it online, it's actually really, really important to look at that test before students sit it. It's also a really good way to think, is this the right appropriate test for this group of learners or for this akunga in my classroom that I want to assess around their reading skills? So yeah, take your time to look at that. I'll show you online in a minute. Now the STAR scale, this is just showing you a sample of, down the bottom, you can see all the subtests, or the tests down the bottom, the 10 of them. And as you can see down here in 3A, these are the 4 subtests, and you can see where each question sits somewhere on the scale. And as you work up the scale up to year 9, you can see the level of difficulty of the questions, which you'd expect to see, okay? So the scores on each of the tests can be converted to a location on what we call the STAR scale. So we have the PAT Pangaro scale, we have the PAT Pānui scale. This is what we call the STAR scale. So it's also qualitatively described. Each question sits on the scale. The more difficult the question, that's the word or the text they're responding to, then the higher up the scale it sits, which is up in here, like in test 9A. You expect the questions to be up there, okay? But you can also see there's a crossover from test to test, so they sort of work their way up. Scale scores are supplemented with normative information in the form of stanines so that test scores can be compared with scores of a national representative reference group at specific year levels. So we have both scale scores and stanines. But what here at NZCER we're focusing more and more on is around the importance of the scale, because that's where we can start to think about progress students are making. And the top right-hand side here is a monitoring document that we have around monitoring progress. And on here it has the average means and talks around what average progress looks like across a year. So like 1 year's progress. I'll put that link where you can find that in the chat later on when I stop in a few minutes. Okay. So by using the STAR scale, we can easily compare the progress our kunga make from year to year. Scale scores can be compared regardless of which STAR test our kunga sit. It's important to remember that each score is an estimate of ability. An individual akunga scale score should be thought of as lying in a probable range rather than being a precise figure. We have to remember that because it's being the type of test it is. At the same time as us refreshing here at NZCER the PAT Pangaro and the PAT Pānui, we're starting to develop resources to support schools to be able to support learners to think around the role of the assessments they are sitting. So for PAT Pānui and Pangaro, we have a nice new kaiako guide. For STAR, we actually do have a teacher manual that is available as well. We have the monitoring progress sheet, which is the orange document down here. Then I'll put the link to. That'll support you think about progress. If your students are going to sit, whether it be PATs or the STAR assessment, there's a fantastic little video here to introduce your students to the assessments. Really key to show them that. And we're starting to add other tools into this little web link that I'm just going to put in the chat now for you, that we were just going to keep growing across the next year. The moment we're in the throes of making a video for teachers that they can watch at the start of next year, that gives them some background information around PAT assessments. So they're all our assessment things that we've got. What I'm going to spend the next few minutes with you now is just to take you into Assist and just to show you some of the reports that come up for the STAR test. So within the STAR test at the classroom level, you get a list report, an individual student report, a subtest report for each of the 4 or 6 subtests, and a Stay 9 report. I'm not going to focus today on the school-wide picture. I'm going to do that in another series later this month, and we're going to focus on the aggregated progress over time and the learner progress report, but I'll do that in the next series that I do. So it's going to come out of here and go into Assist. So NZCER Assist is where all the data is entered. We don't have marking keys. They all get entered into Assist now, just so that you can get the richness of reports. So this is demo data. So I'm showing you just demo data here to show you the reports, to give you a little sense of feel. So we're on a dashboard. Once your school has registered, you can register for the STAR assessment. If your students are sitting in a paper format, you then just enter the data into Assist at this part, or if they're sitting it online, you give them a token and they sit it online. Nice and easy. So as a teacher, you could be, teachers would be allocated their test that matches their students. So this test was for year 3, they sat it in term 1, and they're using the 3 to 4A test. They're going to sit it again later in the year, then they'd go to the 3 to 4B test. So each year level there's 3 to 4A, 3 to 4B, 3 to 4C. So we have nice options there to be able to select the right tests for students. This is the preview eye that I talked about before, and I will just show you that so you get a sense and feel. Okay, this is using our old format. So this is what it looks like. This is in our old format. It hasn't got our new design flair here at NZCER, but it is on the list to be looked at. So here's our STAR test. It just describes to the students what it is, and then they will start their test on the next page. They have 2 little demo questions that they start with, and I shouldn't use that word, they're selecting the right one. They have 1 little demo at the start of each subtest, and then they can just work through and answer which ones. Before they move on to the next one, they can either skip the questions, come back to them, or they're reminded they need to be answered all the questions. Then they move to the next subtest, and once again, here's the drop-down box, and they get to choose which is the appropriate word to go in there, and then they move through to the actual test, okay? So that's just a little sense and feel of what it looks like for you. So this is what I talked about before around getting the teachers to preview, have a little look to make sure it's the right test for students. It's really, really important. Okay. Back here to reports. So here in the right is the reports that are available. So they have a different type of suite of reports compared to the PAT, Pānui and Pangaro. They're more specific because it's a different type test. So this is the list report, which has in the class, the students that are in that class. We can put them in order of scale, score order, and think around how they got on against the scale when we think about here. So we have quite a range of students in here. Couple of students have admitted some questions too, important to think about those. Then over on the right-hand side, it talks around the number of questions that students got within each subtest. Okay, so you start to get a sense and feel. You might get a little sense and feel when you think about strengths and next steps, when you might be looking at word recognition or you want to look at the vocabulary, okay? But we can see that in another view, and the best view to see that is actually in the subtest view. So I'll go there first next. So this is a view of the subtest. And so this very first one is a summary of the word recognition. Here it is at the top, word recognition. And so this shows across here the students who got underneath each of these, okay? So got the number of students across the spread that was out of 10. The critical range means this is the group of students I really need to focus in on and think around those learners. What other information do I have about them? Remembering this is just one test at a certain typical point of time, okay? So you're trying to think around looking across the subtests. So now I can come down and I've got here one student who didn't sit to that test. I can click on each of them and the students come up down the bottom. So I can come down here to number score 2 got 10 and their names will come up down the bottom here. So you know who those students are. So you can click on each range. So you're just looking across to compare. So if we go from here, we can see we've got a group of learners who need some further work around word recognition. We've got some strength the other end of word recognition. Let's see what we notice as we go down to sentence comprehension. Okay. And once again, you can click on, we don't have as many at the top end, a little bit more in the middle. And once again, you can click on the score and see who sits within that. Okay. Then I'm coming down to paragraph comprehension, and I'm once again seeing a wider spread. There's more responses here within a paragraph. And you can start to see the spread is starting to shift more to the middle here. And then down the bottom, I can look at my vocab, how we're going with vocab. So it's just a little snapshot to think around how students are getting on against these 4 areas in reading. Then the last one we can also look at is the individual student report. Oops, please reload. Here we go. So this does not look as pretty as our new reports, but work in progress. Here we go. I'm trying to find a student. I'll just find a student who I've got. I think it's here, number 5. Here we go. So the big dotty line through the middle with the orange band that sits behind, that is the scale score. And this child's sitting right bang smack in stay 9.5, so the top of the bell curve. So they're around the median scale score, okay? You can see where they're sitting, the red being the critical area, the blue being typical for their age range, and at the top here, the other top piece. Okay, so you can see that this student is typically sitting in the blue band all the way across. Okay, but you might think that actually they're a little bit lower here in their paragraph comprehension. You may think about that. It's just giving you a little picture around that learner. Okay, then down the bottom, it gives you the average mean of what they got and where they're sitting in that typical range. So it just gives you a little short snapshot around how they're doing against those 4 substrands. If I choose another learner, we get a different picture. So now you can see they're in the critical range for 3 of them, but their vocab was higher. Okay, so what do I need to work on here with this student? So it gives you just a little bit of information that you can put it against other information that you have about the student. So using the filters on the right, you can easily flick through and look at your individual students. Okay, so that looks at an individual picture level. And then you can go to the subtest level where you can look at your whole class. Okay. So the STAR test is a very quick, easy little assessment to do to find out around their skills and a little bit about reading comprehension. We have asked the ministry to see if it's a good test for now for our year 3s to sit, having to think around what is best for year 3s with the ministry changes to thinking around twice yearly reporting and reading. And they've said, yes, using STAR is a good starting point. And so it could be a nice way of looking in from structured literacy into reading comprehension. How are they going with these 4 subtests? Okay, so that is a little bit about STAR.